each one of us to be holy, to be indeed saints. This reflects God's goodness. Because He is love, He wants to share Himself with us. He wants us to be holy. But what are saints made of? Are they brought up with eyes cast downward and mumbling prayers non-stop? The discussed Carmelite order has in itself distinguished holy men and women who led their Carmelite way of life in extraordinary ways and became great apostles of love for others to follow. These humble souls God have raised to the height of sanctity for the good of the Church and for the whole mankind. Let me introduce you to one of our greatest Carmelite saints, our mother foundress, Saint Teresa of Avila, also known as Saint Teresa of Jesus.
Sister Carmen, have you printed the invitations for the fifth centenary celebration of the birth of Saint Teresa of Avila?
It will be picked up next week, Mother Superior. What a celebration we're going to have, Mother. This will be a chance to tell the world about our mother foundress. What an exciting time. By the way, Mother, someone from the BC Catholic magazine phoned and said that he would like to come and talk to you about the life of St. Teresa of Avila. He said that he would like to come and write an article about her. He will be dropping in sometime today. That must be the reporter.
Good morning, Sister. May I have a few words with Mother Angela?
Yes, please come in. Please come in.
Good morning, Sister. I'm Don from BC Catholic.
Oh yes, I'm expecting you.
I understand that your order is planning a grand celebration for the 5th centenary of the birth of St. Teresa of Avila. I'd like to write an article about her life. Will you have time to give me the information about St. Teresa?
There's so much to tell about this great saint of ours. Where shall I begin?
Saint Teresa was born to Don Alonso Sanchez de Cepeda and Doña Beatriz Davila y Humada on March 28, 1515, in Avila, Spain, at a time when women were raised to become perfect homemakers.
Before she had even turned 7, the little Teresa desired to see God. She had heard from pious elders that martyrs go to heaven and therefore see God. One way to become a martyr was to be beheaded by the Moors. What was she to do but persuade her younger brother, Rodrigo, to join her in a quest for martyrdom? So they ran away from home to go to the land of the Moors in the hopes to die for Jesus Christ. Missing the children, their mother set up a search party. And as the siblings had barely left Avila's walls, an uncle found them and brought them back to their upset parents.
With her plan thwarted, Teresa settled for a less drastic way to see God. She again convinced her kid brother, this time to become hermits instead. They gathered stones in the garden and piled them up to build quaint hermitages where they could pray all they wanted. This future master of prayer indeed manifested pluck and uncommon fervor at such a tender age. the Cepeda house, Mrs. Beatriz de Umada enjoyed reading stories of fantastic adventures and the narration of heroic deeds of the knights, alternating them with books of piety as an innocent entertainment and a distraction of her worries.
One day, those books fell into the hands of Teresa and Rodrigo. They came with laminas of battles, of walking knights, and of ladies finely dressed and perfumed. Teresa was dazzled by it all. It seemed so attractive to be able to look pleasant and to feel loved by others like those fiction ladies, and she started to imitate them.
She no longer went to the garden to play the hermit's game with Rodrigo. She no longer looked to heaven, repeating forever and ever and ever. She liked to look at herself in the mirror, to take care of her hair curls, to pamper her fine hands, and to put on perfume. Before, she dreamed about being a hermit or about dying for Christ in the hands of the Moors, but now she was concerned about being looked at and admired by the dressy gallants when they passed below the entrance gate of Alcazar.
Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who is the prettiest of them all?
Those years coincided with the death of her mother, who left behind 10 children. This sad occurrence disturbed the joy of Mr. Alonso's house. Mrs. Beatriz de Umada has died. This produced a painful shock in the household. Teresa, who was barely 14, cried inconsolably. She had lost her mother, still so young and beautiful, so good, so affectionate. In her grief, she prostrated herself at the foot of Our Lady of Grace. Sobbing and weeping, she poured out all the pain of her broken heart.
Despite her loss, Teresa grew into a charming teenager, a magnet for attention. At 15, she was vivacious, pretty, and fond of clothes, jewelry, and perfume. She adored romantic novels of knights and chivalry. Passion she shared secretly with her mother. She liked people who liked her. One of them, an older female cousin, was fond of gossip and vanity. This cousin's influence would soon get Teresa involved in a flirtation that sent the town abuzz with gossip and caused her father sleepless nights.
Convinced that the budding woman would not be safe without some female watchdog tethered to her, her father sent her off to a nearby Augustinian convent that ran a kind of finishing school where young women of her class were being educated on social graces, home arts, and things like embroidery, cooking, child care, and many others, and really being prepared for devout domestic life. This period showed some change in Teresa, due perhaps to her deep and abiding affection for the nuns of Our Lady of Grace, notably the novice mistress, Sister Mary Breseno, who impressed the young Teresa with her piety and goodness.
Sister Vicente, I love the way you spend so much time with praying to God. Please, tell me more about how the Lord called you to this vocation.
Oh, sure. You know, the mystery of my vocation started when one day my eyes fell on a book with the following passage. Many are called, but few are chosen. This was the beam of light that made me realize the vanity of life and the dangers of the world.
But did you ever regret your decision? You are so beautiful, Sister Vicente. Surely there must have been someone who must have been attracted to you.
My heart belongs only to God.
So inspiring, Sister Vicente.
This good companionship began to eradicate the habits which bad companionship had formed in her, to bring back her thoughts to desires for eternal things, and to remove some of the great dislikes which she had for being a nun, and which became deeply ingrained in her. She recovered her piety and began considering whether she might have a religious vocation.
After reading the letters of Saint Jerome, she decided to enter the convent. Her father, however, refused to give his consent. At the age of 20, she fled home and joined her friend Juana Suarez at the Carmelite monastery at the Incarnation of Avila.
Not long after her profession, Teresa became very ill and failed to respond to medical treatment. As a last resort, her father took her to the village of Basidas to seek the aid of a famous female healer.
My daughter has dizzy spells. I've been to healers and doctors, and nobody seems to help her. Can you help me? My daughter, Mrs. Grayson.
Come here. Come here. How long has it been going on?
About 2 months.
good. That cost you 200 pesos just drink up, drink up. Okay, now take these dried leaves and make a decoction and drink it 3 times a day for 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, all your sickness will go. Okay, good.
Teresa religiously took the medication, but her health did not improve. On her return to Avila, while staying at the home of her uncle Pedro de Cepeda, he gave her the spiritual works of Francis of Osuna to read. The book had a significant impact on Teresa, since she did not know how to proceed in prayer or how to become recollected.
However, she grew increasingly ill, and on August 15, 1539, Teresa fell into such a profound coma that she was feared dead. After 4 days, she revived, but she remained paralyzed in her legs for 3 years.
Through the intercession of Saint Joseph, she miraculously recovered. This began a lifelong affection for the foster father of our Lord Jesus.
Beginning at the age of 39, Teresa began to have vivid experiences of God and God's love. Some friends and religious compatriots thought the experiences could be the work of the devil. Others, however, counseled her to continue mental prayer and concentrate upon the humanity of Christ.
Here's an example of one of her mystical experiences.
One day, when I was at prayer, the Lord was pleased to reveal to me nothing but His hands, the beauty of which was so great as to be indescribable. A few days later, I also saw a divine face which seemed to leave me completely absorbed. Finally, there stood before me the most sacred humanity in the full beauty and majesty of His resurrected body. The vision was accompanied by a light. It is a light so different from what we know here below that the sun's brightness seems dim by comparison.
Her continued prayer led to mystical experiences, such as the transfiguration of her heart, spiritual espousal, and mystical marriage with Christ.
I would see beside me, on my left hand, an angel in bodily form. In his hands, I saw a long spear, and at the end of the iron tip, I seemed to see a point of fire. With this, he seemed to pierce my heart several times, so it penetrated into my entrails. When he drew it out, I thought he was drawing them out with it. But instead, he left me completely afire with a great love for God.
Teresa's work of reform began with herself. She was troubled by the prestige for wealth and the steady stream of visitors to the convent's parlor. She found it too easy to embrace the things of the world: friendships, vanity, gossip, and fine clothing. Such things distracted her from prayer and kept her from God. She then resolved to follow the Carmelites' rule as perfectly as she could, but was distressed by the prevailing atmosphere of the convent.
At the age of 43, despite opposition and resistance from other people, feeling that the order had become too lax in its practice of its rule, Saint Teresa and a small group of sisters decided to found a new convent that would return to the basics of the contemplative order, a simple life of poverty and prayer. The first monastery, St. Joseph, was started in February 1562 when 4 novices took the habit of the discalced Carmelites.
So the order of discalced Carmelites was born then. What does discalced mean, Mother?
Yes, the word discalced comes from the Latin word meaning without shoes. It symbolizes humility and poverty, which characterize the atmosphere of the new convents. Once the disturbance at the convent of the Incarnation and in town settled down, Teresa enjoyed 5 peaceful years, during which she wrote The Way of Perfection.
I read a book that in April 1567, St. Teresa was asked by the Carmelite general to found more convents. Is this true, Mother?
Yes. Over the next several years, she founded more convents. 2 houses for men, for a total of 17. Let me call Sister Carmen to show you some of her famous books. Sister Carmen, will you show Dawn some of St. Teresa's writings?
St. Teresa's developing spiritual doctrine can be found in her 3 most famous books: her autobiography, The Way of Perfection, and The Interior Castle. In her autobiography, St. Teresa describes her life. She teaches about the life of prayer, the 4 stages of prayer, comparing them to obtaining water for a garden. The first stage, the heart's devotion, is like laboring to secure the water transporting it. This is a stage of ridding oneself of distractions in prayer. The second stage, devotion of peace, is like a gardener obtaining water with the aid of a windlass and a bucket. This is a more quiet, passive experience form of prayer, when the human will is lost in God. The third stage, devotion of union, is like irrigation using water from a stream. This type of prayer is a sleep of the faculties. The fourth stage, devotion of ecstasy or rapture, is compared with water being provided by God in the form of rain. In this form of prayer, bodily sensation is lost in a prayer of union with God. In The Way of Perfection, St. Teresa uses the Our Father to teach about prayer, virtue, and solitude, while the interior castle describes deep intimacy with God by means of journeying through various rooms in a castle to its center.
I understand that St. Teresa's works are considered by many to be second only to St. Augustine.
Yes, her written works led her to be declared one of only 36 doctors of the Church.
Oh, is it time for recess?
It is time for midday prayer. Would you like to join us?
Yes, of course.
God, come to my assistance.
Lord, make haste to help me.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
I have chosen to do your will. May your hand be always there to strengthen me.
I have chosen to do your will. May your hand be always there to strengthen me.
Lord, let my cry come before you. Teach me by your word. Let my pleading come before you. Save me by your promise.
Let my lips proclaim your praise, because you teach me your commands. Let my tongue sing your promises, for your commands are just.
Let your hand be ready to help me, since I have chosen your precepts. Lord, I long for your saving help, and your law is my delight.
Give life to my soul, that I may praise you. Let your decrees give me help. I am lost like a sheep. Seek your servant, for I remember your commands.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
The goal of prayer in the communities founded by Teresa is to be with God, union with Christ, to strive to remain in this precious company. You should remain with so good a friend as long as you can, she states. If you grow accustomed to having him present at your side, and he sees that you do so with love, and that you go about striving to please him, you will not be able to get away from him. He will never abandon you.
St. Teresa influenced St. John of the Cross, and he influenced her. Can you tell me about this mother?
They had the greatest admiration for one another. She can be very funny in some of the things that she says. He was a remarkable man. He thought she was terrific too. They approached deep prayer and conversion in different ways, but they complemented each other. You can read both John and Teresa, and you're not going to read a lot of repetition.
What do you find most striking about the life of St. Teresa, Mother?
She was a woman who was head over heels in love with God. She had the deepest prayer intimacy in that union with Him. St. Teresa was highly gifted. She never went to a classroom, to the best of my knowledge, yet she learned how to read and could hold her own with the brilliant Spanish theologian of her day. On a natural level, she was a beautiful woman with a wonderful personality and a great sense of humor. Men look at her twice.
Well, thank you, Mother, for the time and the information that you gave me. I will get back to you again before the article is published to ensure that the notes and the information is correct. Meanwhile, I'm sure that with the intercessory prayers of St. Teresa and of all the Carmelite saints, that this event will be highly successful.
Sister Carmen? Come, my child, and let us finish the preparations for our celebration. There's still a lot of work to be done.
At the end of Saint Teresa's life, she chose to return to Avila, but never made it back because a friend who was a duchess wanted her to visit. Arriving at the duchess' home, ill-nourished and sick, she knew the hour of her death was upon her. On October 4, 1582, in the arms of Blessed Anne of Saint Bartholomew, Teresa entered eternal glory. Her last words were, "O my Lord, now is the time we shall see each other." Her body was exhumed several times after her death, and each time found sweet-smelling, firm, and incorrupt.
Teresa left a large, flourishing order that continues to do a tremendous amount of good. She was beatified in 1614 by Pope Paul V, and in 1617, the Spanish Parliament proclaimed her the patroness of Spain. She is also the patron saint of headache sufferers, religious orders, and lace makers. 40 years after her death, she was canonized as a saint by Pope Gregory XV. In 1970, she was declared a Doctor of the Church, making her the first female to be awarded the distinction. Teresa is revered as the Master of Prayer. Today, there are approximately 10 Carmels in Canada, 60 Carmels in the United States, and more than 800 Carmels throughout the world.
The important thing is not to think much, but to love much. Learn to endure a little for the love of God, without letting everyone know it. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices.
We have come to the end of our play, and we hope that you have enjoyed the show. Now we will introduce you to the entire cast. Alice Arce, Griselda Chua, Luz Quintero, and Olivia Kawaguchi as our Carmelite sisters.
Centenary, Stephanie Kernay as Sister Carmen, Mama Lo as Mother Superior, Don Mason as the reporter and also as Teresa's father, Irona Gibson as a faith healer, and Alexander M. Dokinenko as young Teresa and Rodrigo.